What do you think about open relationships? All the hassle of two or more relationships needs to be something everyone involved needs to be okay with. It can be done correctly by couples that really know how to communicate and are strong in conflict resolution. Usually, this also means starting in an open relationship and not opening up later on. Unfortunately, many couples use opening up the relationship as a solution to avoid the need to communicate better. Those are doomed from the beginning. I saw a post in R or Tifu a few weeks ago, and the dude was talking about how a threesome ended his marriage. What he failed to mention is that the wife was against, but finally agreed. When she did, she found out that he already discussed this with a female co-worker. Then, when the time came, she watched her husband another woman and left the room he kept having with this other woman instead of going after his wife. She posted her side of the story as well. My ex asked if I wanted to have a threesome with her and her female best friend. I happily agreed, and when her friend came home from Japan, we all hung out together and had drinks, just to test the chemistry, you know? Well, her friend and I hit it off. She was super chill and was very funny. The next day, my ex informed me that she still wanted to have a threesome, but I was not allowed to touch her friend. Period. My experiences mesh with yours. It's morally fine as long as everybody's on the same page and not jealous, but people who are theoretically open to it tend to find themselves unprepared when the rubber actually meets the road. The only threesomes I've ever heard of that actually worked out are between a couple and a third that's a stranger to both of them, or everyone involved is a stranger, acquaintance with no emotional attachment to each other. There's a lot more to the story. He didn't even care to do it, but it came up, so he asked his wife. Wife decided to try it just to see what it was like, but had made up her mind to end the marriage as soon as he asked. It was weird AF. I listened to some podcast that went over it. Husband made a post too that told the same story and it lined up. I came away with thinking he asked his wife L because the coworker suggested it and he was happy to do it, but didn't really have any ambition to do it outside of that. A guy I know was in a different but similar situation. He wanted to have his wife get with another dude, and she wasn't interested. He had been trying to convince her to do this for years. Recently she agreed, and he had already created a dating profile for her and found a guy posing as her. The guy came over, had with the wife, and left. Then, they found out that the guy they invited into their bedroom actually lives in the same neighborhood. They invited him back several times. The husband would sit and watch. Eventually, the wife actually started getting feelings for the guy, and the husband was super jealous. They called off the relationship with the guy, but she was still into him. She went behind her husband's back and hooked up with the guy. They're trying to work things out, I guess, but it's a wild situation, lol. I'm in an open relationship, and we talk about everything. We have a really solid foundation of trust, and so far, we've encountered no problems. We're not in denial about jealousy. We experience it, and talk about it, and affirm each other through it. We see other people casually, but have each other as a base, and are upfront with the other people so everyone's on the same page. We just know that we can't necessarily meet all our needs between just us, and get other things from other people. And that works great between the two of you, right? But are you absolutely sure none of the other people any of you dated was hurt along the way? I feel like working poly relationships are still super focused on the primary couple and they don't really care who they hurt, as long as it's not themselves and they get what they want. I'm in an open relationship that was closed before. This is hard, man. Has been 4 months of intense therapy and conversations with my so back and forth. I was her first, she was my second. We've been together for almost 9 years. Happens, and she went to live across the country 1600 km far. We get to see each other for only sporadic. I'm in uni, she's in uni. We like each other too much to just break it up, but both of us want to see other people too, when we're far apart, but not when we're together. It's worth the shot. It's either this or a breakup, I guess. I mean, not like an ultimatum, but ultimately would lead to one, I think. We feel the need to explore a bit more. Even if she came back, I think we'd go on for a while. I do hope that one day it will close. I can't fathom living like this for the rest of my life. But right now, it's working, I guess. I think I passed the wrong idea with my first phrasing. Communicating better won't even fix the issue. If we're together, and I start dating and develop the same feelings for someone else, will you be happy with losing that share of me? And can our relationship withstand both the loss of time spent together and me developing serious feelings for someone else? And don't forget, if you're both dating other people, and each of you spent, say, 40% of your relationship allocated time with the other party, then due to this happening at different times and people having different schedules, you may end up losing a lot more than 40% of your time together. This just feels healthy at this point. Monogamy often gets represented as being someone's everything, which often translates to spending all your damn time together. What about family, friends, coworkers, hobbies? I have a couple partners and live with one. But even now, when we're iced in for a couple days, we're still making an effort to take time apart. That's easily time you can see other people. A big aspect that's being missed here is joy for your partner being happy with someone who isn't you, as well as trust that they still love you. One of my live-in partners moved out after 6 years together, and it was a transition, and we grieved that part of the relationship, but we didn't act like the relationship is gone. We still communicate and send memes and plan vacations and have dates, and we also have the trust that we're both still choosing this relationship. Got a couple of well-working open, poly relations in my surrounding. I learned a lot from them about good communication within a relationship that is immediately transferable to monogamous relationships. Yes, both fail, and definitely more easily if a relationship is open. Because it is more difficult to just ignore the problems, as many people prefer to do instead of communication. I feel a true poly or open relationship has about the same break rate as monogamous relationships, and for the same reasons. However, the raw data is severely skewed due to many people using the excuse of poly, open to just do whatever they want or cheat with consent, and thinking they can do it, and figuring out they can't after the damage is done. The truth is that many people can't do open, poly relations, and that is perfectly okay. Monogamy is a perfectly reasonable boundary to have, as long as both partners can live with that boundary as well. And it seems more and more people want to have a monogamous partner white out the trouble of having to be monogamous themselves. In my opinion, that is not true poly, open. That is just an excuse to not commit to anyone. The poly, open relationships I know are some of the most committed people to each other. Something many monogamous relationships I see can be jealous of, but it remains something that fits for them, and doesn't need to fit everyone else. It's always the same story too. Husband fancies some chick, talks wife into open relationship so he can fool around with chick. Wife reluctantly agrees. Husband has some fun until the chick gets bored. Suddenly hubby realizes it's hard to find someone else to hook up with. Meanwhile, wife is going through more sausage than Oktoberfest. Husband gets jealous. Wife says, "You wanted this relationship," comes apart at the seams. I've seen it happen to like 5 different dudes. Lamau. When I met my wife, she was dating someone else. We clicked very well, so I was ready to start my relationship opened. Then her other guy met someone else who clicked with him. They have become good friends with us. This might be due to the fact that we are all adults. It may not be possible to do that at a more tempestuous age, but monogamy found us when we found each other. I took to it like a fish to water. It made sense to my weirdo brain on a base level in a way normal relationships never did. It was just so much easier. But I'm currently single, and probably going back to monogamy anyway. Not because I've got any problem being open, but because I'd rather have a good relationship with a monogamous person than a bad one with a poly person, and there are a lot more monogamous people around. Ugh. But then of course, I'm gonna have to either hide how I feel about the issue, or at some point, they'll get mad at me about how I'm not acting properly jealous when I'm supposed to be, and so how can they trust me? Maybe I'll just stay single. Actually, people are exhausting. I was in one for about 4 years. My wife back then pitched it to me, and I was curious. Of course, you're thinking, I get to have with other women and my wife is cool with it. Sign me up. So, I did. I got Tinder accounts and met others. Soon thereafter, though, problems started popping. Jealousy, lying, and lack of trust towards my wife. Come to find out, she had a side guy long before she proposed the open relationship angle. I thought the met organically and was cool with it, as I was meeting people too. But I suppose the fact that it was no longer taboo for her made her crazy jealous that I was getting attention and giving attention to new women. The whole thing imploded. It became exhausting and an emotional drain. We ended up getting a divorce and haven't spoken in 5 years. I've met a lot of great people that can make it work, but that percentage is super small. It's really hard, especially if you have multiple partners at once. My ex-wife wanted separate personal nights. I spent my personal nights with our 3 kids, and she spent her nights with friends. Then it became a friend, and finally, it became a guy friend. She then filed for divorce. That was a rough 6 months, but I survived. I definitely understand the less guilt motive for divorce, but it's still not for me. It was nights out with friends, then nights out and friends over on weekends, then it was pretty much always this one friend and occasional others. And by the time I was done with basically being the babysitter while she cheated, they were both blowing up 2 marriages and claiming to anyone who would listen how horrible their spouses were for not supporting their lifestyle. It wasn't a lifestyle. They were cheating with extra steps. By the way, years later, and I love being single. It's the best. Kids are old enough to support it too. I know it sounds dismissive, but I promise it does get better. My ex-wife did it because she wanted to live like she was single yet come home to someone every night. Convinced or guilted me into it. I followed all the rules we set, but she broke a lot of them. Combine that with lots of verbal and emotional abuse over the course of 4 years. I decided I had enough and filed for divorce. She then proceeded to tell all my friends and family I was cheating on her. Since our open relationship wasn't publicized, it very much looked like I was cheating. I finally said enough is enough of having my name dragged through the mud, and told everyone what really happened. And 99% of our friends and family dropped or blocked her and went no contact. She moved several hours away and has almost no friends, and her family doesn't hardly talk to her anymore. I'm now with someone exclusively that cares for me, is extremely sensitive to anything that could trigger bad reactions due to the past abuse, and communicates about literally everything. Her 2 small kids absolutely adore me too. We've been together for almost 2 years now. Saw my ex about a year ago, 3 years post-divorce. She looked rough and miserable. I still have one friend that keeps up with her occasionally and told me she's absolutely miserable and always posts negative things on social media complaining about her life and such. I'm happier than I've ever been and she's miserable. Karma's I don't judge others in them, but wish them luck. You see this all the time. I'm not attracted to Tom anymore, and the thought of having with him again make my skin crawl. But he's such a nice guy and we co-parent really well together. I don't hate him and want good things for him. I wonder if he finds another lover who can stomach with him. If I could get all the perks of marriage, like a live-in co-parent and BFF, and financial stability from Tom's stable job and help with the dishes and nighttime parenting, while not having to have much with him, and I could even have with lots of other dudes. So get my rocks off with guys I actually enjoy with. Worst case scenario, we just divorce, I guess. Hey Tom, have you ever thought about other women? I'm happier than I've ever been and she's miserable. It happened to me, dude, in a whole other city. Bought her a place and for a solid year just thought I was a roommate of hers. I was head over heels with the lady too. From my end, everything seemed to be working out until a mutual friend who worked with her brought it up. I ended up losing my apartment because resigning time came around, and my partner just dipped. Left me with covering her share of rent and no time to find a roommate before I had to move out. I have no problem with open relationships even now, but I'm a hell of a lot more selective now on who I give my attention and energy to, which gets lonely, but at least I'm not getting lied to. I had an ex who proposed an open relationship, so in good faith, I decided to give it a try even though I personally wasn't terribly interested in finding another person to date. But I'm not a particularly jealous person, so I figured that would be okay. Spent a year listening to her go on and on about a coworker she had a crush on, and no matter how much she would hint around about it, he would never take the bait. After a year of listening to that day in and day out, I reconnected with an old friend, and it turned out we still were both attracted to each other, and she was in an open relationship too. The second my partner found out, she flipped out and got super jealous and angry. Turns out she had not even considered the notion that I might take advantage of our open relationship before suggesting it. Our relationship didn't end right away, but that certainly signaled the beginning of the end. Something similar happened to a friend of mine. The situation came up where they both were kind of interested in opening up their marriage and agreed to kitchen table and then non-hierarchy polyamory. She starts seeing a mutual female friend for a while. He struggles to initially find partners. She ends things with mutual female friend and finds ideal secondary partner. He's struggling less with finding partners. She doesn't like the way he's dating and voices her concerns. He ends things with multiple partners over a year or so. She accuses him of not taking it seriously and just looking for partners too, while also constantly moving goalposts and changing rules for him, while not adhering to them as well. She stops prioritizing marriage in favor of secondary relationship. They begin couples therapy. While he is also engaging in solo therapy, he is doing the work to improve upon himself. She can't acknowledge any shortcomings and unwilling to do work on herself. Eventually, things get to a breaking point, and they are finalizing a divorce. My friend is far from perfect and still has lots to work on, but he is aware and is constantly trying to improve himself. She was such an asshole, for a lack of better term. First time I met her is when I was volunteered to help her friend move, and she barely spoke 2 sentences to me over the course of multiple hours. Second time I was around her was when I was invited over for pizza for helping said friend move, and again, barely spoke 2 sentences to me over the course of several hours, and made me feel like my presence was unwanted, so I left. He found a new partner through a mutual interest that is such a kind and loving partner for him, and I couldn't be more happy that he found that. Moral of the story: I think polyamory could only work for a small demographic of people, and I definitely am not one of those people. It was exhausting listening to his experience and reconfirmed my stance. I think life is complicated. For one, if I were in better shape, I'd attract more people, but at the same time, feel like I'm not crazy enough. Many of the losers I know that get into relationships find someone that wants to fix them, or at least wants to be with them, because they don't know how to find someone normal. I think I bore people to death. Even though I'm hilarious, I have a stable job, and I don't drink alcohol. That often means relationship doom. I feel like a lot of us actually get addicted to the flirting, chatting and dating phase, where you're getting to know someone, and it's all exciting and new. Then people get bored by the idea of a safe, committed relationship where there's nothing left to learn about the person anymore. A lot of people want the open thing because they like dating people. I think the idea that you've learned everything and there's nothing else new to know about a person is the first problem. I was in a polyamorous relationship for about a year, and even to the end of it was constantly learning things about my partners, their SOS, etc. I'm now monogamous and married, and years down the road, I'm still learning things about my partner. They've lived a whole life before me. It will be many, many years before I know everything about them. My parents have been together for 40 years, married for 36. A couple weeks ago, we went and stayed with one of my dad's childhood friends. As the wine got flowing, she regaled the rest of us with various stories of the shenanigans they got up to with their other friends. My mom was having the time of her life hearing all these stories she'd never heard before. This was northern Wisconsin in the early 80s. Lots of teenage drunken shenanigans. 2 mentally healthy people will continue to learn about themselves and each other, and grow and change together. Between 2 people who care about the other's needs, enjoy being near each other, and all that good stuff, there will always be something to talk about. I love being married. She's everything to me. I hope everyone gets to experience that once. Not my wife, lol. I think a huge part of the problem is people get into a relationship and stay with someone even when it's the wrong person, and it might not be that the other person is a bad person, although of course, they can be, but they're not the right person for them. Once you're with someone, I think there is a huge tendency to stay with them, even when it isn't really working, and that of course leads to both people not being happy. I've certainly stayed with people way longer than I should have. Whether it was sunk cost fallacy, the fear of being alone, not wanting to hurt the other person, I didn't leave when I should have. It took me a long time to find a partner like the one you describe. I think the problem is a lot of people stay with the wrong person. And it isn't necessarily that a long-term relationship is safe or boring. It's that they're not with the right person. And so that's why they feel they need to keep looking, but they don't. Tried it. She had some dudes, and when I picked up started getting jealous. Most open couples aren't really open. Usually, someone wants it or just wants to cheat without guilt, and someone's getting dragged in too, pretending it's okay. Very few true open relationships. It's proven by how many last more than a year. This has been the experience I've witnessed as well. Long story, but my wife and I basically tanked her friend's wedding because we couldn't watch those two get married. The bride was full poly, and the groom was high-functioning autistic and self-described as all. After spending time together, it was very obvious that she was being manipulative and he was not okay with her dating. We have a lot of stories about my wife's old circle. My husband and I did it very enthusiastically. For about 6 years, we made the decision to try it after 24 years of marriage, and because neither of us had had any other partners before we met. For us, it was a fantastic experience. We did foursomes, threesomes, clubs, and parties, and played separately as opportunities presented themselves. We never had issues with jealousy, but we had a very strong relationship with a high degree of trust. We definitely saw a lot of marriages fail due to those issues. Eventually, we sort of faded out of it though. It is just a lot of work. Finding people with the right chemistry, the online dating scenes, going to the clubs, the meetups that don't always work. It's exhausting, but for us, it was definitely worth it. And if my hubby came to me tomorrow saying that he'd met someone he'd like to, I'd still be cool with it. I personally hate them because of an ex. I was pressured to make our relationship open for months, and I really didn't want to. That wasn't the kind of relationship I wanted to have. I later then found out that she was pushing so hard because she was already sleeping with other guys, and wanted a guilt-free way to cheat on me, and ended up sleeping with 3 other people that I am aware of. Generally, I don't mind them if that's what you want, and all parties are okay with that situation. I have a friend who does that, and he's never been happier in terms of a relationship with someone, but I will refuse to ever do an open relationship with anyone. In my experience, it's an excuse to cheat. When my ex told me about his first affair, he didn't say it was an affair, he said he was polyamorous, and was tired of hiding his secondary partner and wanted to tell me about her. We'd been married 8 years at the time. I had married him believing him to be monogamous. He didn't understand that you don't get to just change the terms of your relationship without the other party's consent. He had unilaterally decided since he had discovered he was poly, it was okay to go explore other relationships without ever telling me. Okay, theory, not opposed to open relationships if that's what both parties agreed to and signed up for. But for me, nah. Sitting there that night, listening to my husband explain why his cheating was honorable and praiseworthy, and I should be happy for him. Nope. Never again. Life is what it is. It taught me a lot about myself. I loved him, and thought at first maybe it was legit. So I actually tried to support him at first, and that's my main regret. I should have drawn the line and left then. Because what followed was a really awful couple of years of him cheating with various people, lying about it, gaslighting me, and eventually descended into abuse. In retrospect, I think he didn't want to be married anymore, but faced the idea that he didn't want to be a family man and wanted to be free of responsibilities. But since he couldn't face that, he was basically mistreating me until I couldn't take it anymore, but framing it as being the victim himself in this journey of self-discovery. Anyway, as a result, I don't have the most positive view of open relationships, lol. I do think it's a legit thing that can be done with both parties' consent. I just think too many people use it to hide behind for tie behavior.